Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make this world a better place. Welcome to episode 368 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Claudia Naim-Burt. Claudia is the co-founder and COO of Keep Company, an HR tech platform that helps employers support and retain parents and caregivers. Founded in 2022, Keep Company has been recognized by Techstars and Melinda French Gates' Pivotal Ventures as a rising leader in care tech, SHRM as a leading workplace innovation, and by Technically as a startup on the rise. Keep Company has closed $2.3 million in venture capital financing, making Claudia one of the only 150 Latinas to raise over $1 million in venture capital. Let me repeat that again. Claudia is one of the only 150 Latinas to raise over $1 million in venture capital. Previously, Claudia was a member of the leadership team at FrameBridge, a direct-to-consumer custom framing company, where she led brand and communications. As a 10th employee to join the company, she helped scale the business to over 400 employees, retail locations, and passed $82 million in venture funding. After FrameBridge, Claudia served as an entrepreneur in the residence at NEA as a strategic advisor to several high-growth businesses, including Poppy Flowers. Claudia has held marketing and communication roles at American Express and Edelman Public Relations. Listeners, this conversation with Claudia was, first of all, that statistic in her bio of being one of the only 150 Latinas that have raised over $1 million. That alone was a lot to take in. And even in her words, it's a really sad stat. There needs to be more of us there. And so I really think this conversation is going to give you a lot of insights and even, I would say, perhaps hunger. It gave me a lot of perspective. And I do want to give a shout out to Claudia because she was not just generous during the interview, but she was also generous with her time. And she gave me lots of nuggets, gold nuggets that I can use to even grow Café con Pam. Y bueno, sin más, here's my conversation with Claudia Naim-Burt.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Claudia, welcome to Café con Pam. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Yes, happy to have you. So the first question that we always ask is, what is your heritage?
I am from Venezuela. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and grew up between Caracas and the DC area.
So you were born in Caracas and then went back and forth?
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to DC?
I moved to DC. My dad worked for the World Bank. We were supposed to be here for 2 years, stayed for longer, and then moved back to Venezuela for middle school and then back again to DC for high school. So it was pretty much truly 50-50. My childhood pre-18 was pretty much 50-50 Caracas, DC.
How was it for you to live such a back and forth? I mean, kids are very resilient and it's still like friends and things that I'm sure, because I did a little bit of a back and forth, not as much as you, but it was like when I would go back, my friends would talk about things that they experienced and I'm like, oh, I was over there. How was it for you?
It was hard. It was really hard. I think, it's one of those things where now as like a grown, fully resourced adult, I'm grateful for it. It definitely was strengthening, but it was hard. I think it was hard to, in Caracas, I was the gringa. In DC, I was like the Latin girl. And so I think that piece of it, and also like, I've always been somebody that had different groups of friends, but I think there's an element of like, you don't fully fit in anywhere.
Yes.
And so this idea of like living in the same house your whole life, like that is very foreign to me. I have always had like different groups that understand different parts of me. But the people that fully understand me are my siblings, right? Like the people that that kind of had a similar experience.
Totally. How many of you?
3. I'm the middle.
You're the middle.
I'm the middle, and I'm like truly the middle.
Say more.
I think like I have 2 boys now, and you just start to see how much birth order affects how you show up in the world. And so like I do think when I watched Encanto, I called my sister, and I was like, the weight of the world is on your shoulders as the eldest daughter. Like, I really do think that is a real pressure. Like, there is a different pressure on the eldest. There is a different dynamic with the youngest, where they're always trying to not be the youngest, not be treated like the baby. And I think the middle is somewhere in between, like a bridge builder. I definitely think I was always really independent. But I'm a sensitive soul. And I think like I always felt a little bit squeezed in the middle.
For sure. I'm the eldest. So you mentioned Encanto. We recently rewatched it. And I was like, oh my gosh. ¿Cómo se llama? Luisa, no?
Luisa.
I'm like, yes, I 100% get it.
Yeah.
And so my sister who's in the middle, when you say you're very strong, it made me think of she literally doesn't tell us things until it's like done and resolved. And we're like, why didn't we know? And she's like, because I'm alone. And we're like, you're not.
That's so interesting that you say that. I am definitely like that. Like I have a hard time asking for help while I'm like really in it. I tend to like resolve it before I pull people in, and I'm like really, it's something I'm working on. But I've never thought of that as being a middle child thing. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because that is absolutely, as we work with parents and caregivers at my current company, and it's very much a parallel process. Like it is very much like I'm learning to do all the things that we coach and teach them to do. And for me, one of those, probably the number one is learning how to ask for help.
Absolutely. And I think middle children, because I've like, now that I'm the eldest, and then it's my sister, my brother. And
so you're like us, 2 girls and then a boy.
Yeah. And so my brother lived in Mexico City for a long time. And now that he's back, I'm noticing a lot of the like dynamics that I didn't, because I haven't lived with my family for a long time. And so I'm noticing like the things, and that's why I was like, we need to rewatch Encanto, because like there's a lot of
You're
stuff.
like family movie night.
Yes, 100%. And so and him who is the youngest, he literally is always like, no, sin problema, ¿me acompañas? Like, can you come with me? And I'm like, sure. Pero yo as the eldest, I'm always like, I just get it done, or I delegate.
That's interesting.
But my sister who's the middle, she just does it. So fascinating.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. I do think, I feel so strongly that having children for me was so expanding, because one of the things that allowed me to do was build compassion for myself. Like, I think that I love these little people so much, and I have so much I see the world through their eyes, and it has allowed me to imagine how certain things felt when I was younger and build self-compassion that way. It's this really beautiful part of becoming a parent. But I do think it has made me reflect more on certainly my childhood, the role I play in my family, like the dynamics that we control, the dynamics that we don't, and the extent to which, like to a certain extent, like you come out, you just kind of are who you are. And it's all kind of a journey to just accept it. And when you see these little people, and like, the way my kids were when they were babies, that's kind of how they still are. And of course we evolve, but it allows, I don't know, there's like a freedom there. There's like an acceptance, I think, that is powerful for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of inner child healing that happens as you parent your own kids. For sure.
Yes.
Totally. So back to your story. So you moved a lot back and forth. And then how did you decide we're going to stay here? Probably had to do with the political climate in Venezuela.
Yeah, so the political climate in Venezuela got more and more tense. The crime got worse. Like it just got much less stable. And I think my parents were like, we have about to be teenage daughters. Let's move back to DC. And so I did high school here in DC and then stayed for college. And then, my husband is American. My life is here now. It's a thing though, right? Like my kids have never been to Caracas, and my kids are like pandemic babies. You know what I mean? Like it's my husband has never been to Caracas. Like there's a loss. There's a loss in not being there, and a guilt when things aren't when they're like particularly rocky. I have a very, very big, very, very close, wonderful family. There's a lot of complexity to people being spread throughout. But, it's part of the immigrant experience. Like, I really think that if I had to pick a few words to describe myself, like certainly immigrant would be one of the top three. Like this idea of rebuilding and the way that intersects with like identity and resilience, like that's a huge part of like my family.
Even within the U.S., I don't know if you have family in the U.S., but the U.S. is such a big country that it's also like you have family spread out, and it's like, well, I see them when I see them. It's not like in Latin America where everyone pretty much most of the time lives in the same city or country or like ciudad. You go see your cousins all the time. Like aquí no es tanto así unless it's, it depends on the family, but in my case, and I think yours either.
Yeah, like here you have to fight so hard to live that way. That's what I think is interesting. Like even my family, like I have a lot of family in Miami. They have to fight harder to see each other here than they did. And they're still in the same city.
Yeah.
And you just feel that. And I think that like for me, again, like this bicultural thing, when I had kids, is when it got really loud. Like I felt like when I had my first child, I felt like I had this like reckoning where I had Latin expectations. I had expectations that like the village would pour in and everybody would come hold me while I held this baby. And I really think I had a true reckoning of like, I have Latin expectations, but I'm living in a very American nuclear family reality. Yeah. And so that was a real process for me to say, because I have very close friends. I'm very close to several of my cousins. My sister lives in Guatemala. I have a wonderful, beautiful support network of women, really, like that like, hold me up.
Yeah.
Not many of them are in DC. And so and that was never an issue for me. I've always like worked a lot, and I have a wonderful husband and I have friends. But when you have a baby, they're like WhatsApping you and FaceTiming you. Mm-hmm. And for the first time, you're like, this isn't enough. You're like, for me, I was like, I don't want you to call me. I want you to come hold this baby so I can go to the bathroom. I want you to I want to take a shower. I want you to like literally hold me, right? Like, so I think for me, it was a real reckoning to be like, I need to rebuild this or redesign this, or like, what is the village to me living here in this place today? And so I think, and now even it's evolving, like as my kids get a little bit older, I'm thinking about how often do I want to make sure that like my cousins are part of their lives, and I want to go to Miami. I want them to speak Spanish. But you have to really fight to hold on to those parts because it doesn't just like happen, right?
Es difícil.
Es difícil. Es bien difícil. Y es complicado y cambia con cada estación de la vida.
Right. As they grow. Porque like probably when they were younger, it was harder for you to travel with them. Or sometimes, I don't know, I hear parents say either way. Like sometimes they're like, oh, I love traveling when my kid was a baby. And then some of them are like, yeah.
I have like intense, spicy babies.
And so there's a lot of things. How did you come to terms when especially probably with your first one, with the Latina expectation of like, I need to be held, and the holding happened digitally. How did you, what did you do to just come to terms with it?
I think I still am, honestly. I think I'm like, and I had like so many women, like so many parents, this experience of like pandemic motherhood, which is like such a more extreme version of what we were already living. So I realized I was pregnant with my second child the first day of lockdown. And I entered a period of like such isolation. Like there were no witnesses to that pregnancy. There were no, like that postpartum was so difficult. And so, and at the time, you know, they didn't really, like a lot of the guidance we were getting was the mom is at risk, the baby's high risk, like COVID with COVID.
Because we didn't know anything.
And so we were cautious. And so we were really locked down. And to experience a pregnancy and a postpartum that way was so difficult. So I think I'm still moving through, you know, like, how do I want to design this? And I think like one of the challenges as a parent is like, it's always a moving target. So like, you have to remind yourself like, no, he's a little bit bigger now. We can just get on the plane. He's a little bit, you know, like he can watch an iPad. Like we're like, there's no diapers. Like we just moved out of diapers. Like, let's go. You have to like kind of catch up to the moment that you're in. So I think just on it, like being honest, it's been a lot of introspection, a lot of like conversations with my husband, a lot of conversations with my older sister. And then I'm still in it. I think in a way I always will be. Like I'll always be moving through what is best for me, what is best for my family in any given season. That's like, I think this idea that like, congratulations, you have found balance, I think is such
a lie.
It's such a mirage. Like this idea that like you found it. No, like we are always changing and evolving. And by the way, so are our kids and our parents and our spouses and our friends and our needs and like the world. So I think it's kind of always in motion.
Yeah. And you have to adjust and just keep it moving. Because for my sister, my niece and nephew, when they were little, she would send them to us over the summer. And I mean, this started when they were like 3, and I would go pick them up and they would come. But now that they're older, they don't want to come because they're going to miss out summer with their friends. And so totally agree with like, you just have to adjust and evolve, because it went from like, oh, the kids are coming to San Diego because I live in San Diego, to like, I guess we're planning a trip to go see them because they don't want to come to see us. So it's always moving.
It's always moving. And I think for like a type A, high achiever, planner, I work a lot. I'm like, no, guys, we had a plan.
Yes.
Like the plan is changing? What? Why? I hate that. But you know, it's like building in some flexibility to like meet the moment and also some grace that like your needs can evolve. Like for me, I was like heads down, work and my babies, and now I'm like lifting up a little bit more. So like I am feeling more pulled to visit family and stretch the boys and give them more experiences and stuff like that.
I like that. So to bring it back to your story, you went into corporate. Mm-hmm. So you stayed here, moved into the corporate ladder, like have done so much. Like we probably need 7 hours to explore your whole career. And how was it for you to decide that, well, let's backtrack. So as we're in corporate, given that you have such a different experience, I haven't met that many people like you and me, because I resonate with a lot of with your experience of like back and forth and like de aquí, de allá, de todos lados. But that's not as common. Many times we experience, other Latinas are like first gens, you know, their parents came, grandparents came, and they grew up here, and that's where they are. And so how was it for you to navigate with such a different type of story?
It's interesting. I always felt, honestly, and back to your first question, like what was it like moving so much? it really, like, I knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the heart of it. I was very grounded in myself. And so being different, by the time I entered the workforce, it didn't feel like threatening, or it felt just like a fact. And I think that there was confidence in that. And I think like there's also privilege in having a very connected, rooted nuclear family, which again, moving does that, right? Like
Yes.
I was very rooted in myself. And I think that's a testament to my relationship with my siblings and with my parents. But it didn't, like, this might seem like a weird thing to say. I didn't think about it that much. Like, I thought more about the task at hand. Like, I am a very high energy person. I like to work. I like to work hard. And I find being good at my work, adding value in that way, I find it very fulfilling. And so I was much more zeroed in on like the task at hand. Like, I was much more like arrive at 7 a.m. and grind before my boss got in. And like that was more what was like so in front of me.
So you took the role of the Latina, but not necessarily it wasn't questioning the identity.
Yeah, like I was always like, I feel like I was always really proud of who I am, but it wasn't at the front of my experience, and I was more like in the work, I guess I would say, is if that makes sense. I also think like I live in DC. Like DC is such a melting pot that there's no world where I was the first like non-American born person that people met. Like it is much more of a melting pot. And so like I worked in corporate communications. My office was 2 blocks from the World Bank, and it was, so I think that is an aspect of my experience that I feel very lucky about, that like I wasn't the only one that wasn't from here,
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I resonate with your answer because I work with a lot of first generation Latinas, and this thing of identity, and there's a lot of like publications that have covered this first gen experience, and they often talk about how people feel not enough American and not enough insert country of origin. And maybe it is because of back and forth, because of travel. I don't know. Porque yo también, I never question who I am. And so maybe, and I don't know, you tell me what you think. When I was in school in Mexico City, I was just Pam. I didn't have to check a box. I didn't have to say, this is like, you are who you are. And I think that's what, personally, it helped me like be very rooted into who I am. And so when I come here, I'm like, you can question it however you want. You can have me check a box, however many boxes you need me to check, but I still know who I am. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And I think that, there's this thing that I noticed with my younger cousins, with this like generation that grew up with Instagram, like everybody's a brand manager.
Yes.
For their own personal brand.
Yes.
And it's such a bizarre thing, like to see them like have to describe, like when I was growing up, I didn't have to describe myself in one pithy Instagram bio description, right? Like in 140 characters. And I think that it kind of is connected to this box thing. It's like, which box are you? I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm a bunch. And I've always been a bunch. And the idea of not being a bunch is very odd to me. And so I think that, I don't know, I've always felt like I was many things. And that was okay and expected and much more interesting than being one thing, So, I always resist, like I hate icebreakers. I don't know if you feel this way. I hate icebreakers. It's like, if you were a piece of candy, what would you be? I'm like, I don't know. I'll be like a couple.
A whole bunch.
A whole bunch. And so there's this piece of like, I think people find simplicity very satisfying.
Yes.
Or very, like you can put your hands around it. Like, okay, what box do I put you in? Okay, the end by. And I don't resonate with that.
When I got to college in the US and I had to check all these boxes, I was like, why? This is so weird. Why do you want me to box myself into something? Why can't I be everything and all at once? Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. So as you are navigating corporate. How did you decide you were going to start Keep Company? What was the catalyst?
The catalyst for Keep Company was having my first child. Like I shared, I found myself really in a reckoning. I also think I started to, so many things came together for me. I would say the through line of my life is really a passion for women, a passion to see more women reach their full potential, and to like take blockers off of women. Like I just always, that was a through line for me. And when I had my first child, I remember I became obsessed with this idea that we needed to optimize motherhood. Like, how do I apply my MBA to motherhood? And so, like, I just felt like it was so reactive. It was so survival mode. And I kept thinking, like, I have all these big skills. Like, I have an MBA. I'm a resource allocator. I know how to make a strategic plan. And we're not doing that any of that over here. Like, that doesn't seem to make sense. Like,
the oldest job too.
The oldest job. And I feel like you would never take on a second job without a plan.
Yes.
A budget. And we do that every day at home. And it just doesn't make sense. Like the efficiency-minded optimizer in me just like couldn't do that. And I remember I was going to go back to work after 3 months, and I was still nursing. And I remember I went to, DC has like a breastfeeding center that you can go and meet with a lactation consultant. It's an incredible resource. And it's like a really valuable like physical space where you can go and like talk to a human. And I remember I said, okay, I want you to watch me pump and make sure I'm using the right flange size and the right this and the right that. And like, let's maximize for output. I was like, I want you to tell me that I'm doing this as operationally efficiently as possible. And I remember that night, and to me, I was just like, this is what I do in every part of my life. This is what I'm going to do here. Like it felt so obvious, or like, just like, this is who I am. This is who I am at work, and this is who I am in motherhood, right?
Totally. It's one more role. Let's optimize it.
Exactly. And I knew there was a board meeting the first day I was going to be back in the office. And I was like, I will, like, I'm not going to have time. And that night I went out to dinner with a bunch of girlfriends. And I remember one of them saying to me, I had told them what I had done that day. And she was like, that is so intense. And I had this like visceral response to it. I was like, I'm going to take hours out of my already too short work day, and I'm not going to maximize my output. Like, that's crazy. This isn't crazy. That's crazy. And so it was like a moment for me to say, why are we dismissing the work we do at home simply because it is work that primarily women do? And so for me, that like turned something on. And then I started to see my friends, who by any measure are some of the most well-equipped women in the world. They are women. I went to great schools. I had big corporate jobs. Like, these are women that had tools and had training, and they found themselves feeling ill-equipped. And I became really focused on this question of what would it feel like to be equipped for this transition, so that we didn't have to leave the workforce unless we wanted to. Not because when women often leave the workforce because of caregiving responsibilities, it's often, I just felt like I didn't have a choice. I just felt like I can't keep doing this, so I have no choice but to quit. And that's what kills me. Because if you want to stop working, work part-time, whatever, amazing. I just want it to be your choice. And the more women that I spoke to, the more that I felt this overwhelming, like, they didn't feel like it was their choice. And so that's really where Keep Company was born. So I quit my job. I como buena Latina, I put my ducks in a row. I did consulting. I had like I had my savings. I had my plan. But I shifted my career to this question of like, what would help? And that eventually led to Keep Company.
Okay, we'll talk about Keep Company in a second, but let's take a quick coffee break.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
So, Claudia, do you drink coffee?
I do.
How do you drink your coffee?
Cold 365 days a year.
Is it cold brew or iced coffee?
Cold brew. I love a cold brew. I like coffee. I don't like espresso.
Okay.
So I love coffee. I honestly only drink hot coffee in Latin America, now that I'm thinking about it. Like a café con leche. But in the US, I drink cold brew with, I mean, this is so bougie, but like I need my oat milk. I like my cold brew with oat milk.
Okay.
365 days a year. It doesn't matter if it's 2 degrees in DC, I will drink my cold brew.
Oh my gosh, you're brave. So do you brew your own cold brew?
No.
Or you buy it?
I buy it. And it's so funny because it's like self-care to me. Like I remember when I had my first son, I just realized that after I would drop him off, I have always been the morning parent. My husband has always been the pickup parent. So like I've always done drop off. And the chaos of the morning, the stop to get my coffee was like my shift out of mom mode into like me and work mode. And I've just like held on to that. And it's like a very helpful mechanism for me to shift in my morning. And I just don't want to let it go. I mean, I have a coffee maker, but like I don't use it.
For sure. But that's a really like from since you like systems from an operational standpoint, it's a very systemic way of like giving your body that switch.
It is. How do you drink your coffee?
I mean, if I was to take the time, I would make a pour over. So I'm a hot coffee 365 days. So I'm the opposite. It's very, very rare for me to do cold brew. When I do cold brew, I do cold brew lemonade.
Muy mexicana.
Sí, totalmente. Limón con todo.
Échale limón.
Con todo limón. And so if I ever do cold brew, it has to be lemonade. And so regular, I do like pour overs. That's my pour of choice. But just in my day to day, I have a drip because I live, in a multi-generational household right now, and so we just have the good old big drip coffee maker, and everyone pours from it. But in the last couple of years, I've been into powdered milk, not half and half powdered, like actual whole milk powdered, and it's like it just gives this creamy texture.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it's lots of sugar, like powdered milk. Just it's not necessarily the best for you, but hey, we all have our vices. So,
paying for my coffee every day is not a great thing either, but
yeah,
it sparks joy. So we're going with it.
We are going to go with it.
Stay with your powdered milk.
That's right. So I'm drinking mushroom coffee because it helps with like cognitive
adaptogens.
Adaptogens, for sure. Okay, well, let's get back to the show.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
So, Claudia, you get this moment when you're like, wait, caregivers do a lot of unpaid labor, and it's almost put to the side as if it's like this thing that you have to do, but you don't necessarily like put a lot of thought into it. It's more like a chore kind of. And so how do you, so you said como buena Latina, you put your ducks in a row. How long did it take for you to make that decision of like, okay, we're going to start something, for you to gather your ducks and then launch?
Yeah. So I think like the interesting thing is I did not set out to start a company. That was not my intention. It was one of like the most, this is a weird word to use, like pure moments of my life, in the sense that like it was just genuine curiosity. I was genuinely curious. Like, what are the tools that would help? And that was the frame. And I think it was much more open-ended than anything else I've ever done. Like everything else, like I had a plan, I had a goal, I set that goal, I met the goal, I set the next goal. This was the first time I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I think like it's no surprise that I did that. I didn't do that when I was 22. I did that when I was 35. Like, I had enough professional, personal confidence to be able to kind of create some of that space. But I started, February 20, I knew that I was going to shift in this direction within a year that my son was born. And then I took 6 months to do consulting and get my ducks in a row in terms of being able to have more space for risk. And then I just started talking to people and saying, who do you know in this maternal care space? And I didn't know if it was going to be more of a clinical thing, because I could just feel like women's health was such a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really just kind of started asking people, who do you know in this space? And as I started having conversations, I got several clients very, very quickly, and they were all founders in this maternal care space. And that to me was essentially a sign from the universe. I was just in 4 weeks of conversations and putting myself out there, I had 6 clients. And I was like, okay, universe, message received. I'm going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that had nothing like that had ever happened to me. And I felt like it was truly a spiritual thing. I felt like it was the universe saying keep going in this direction. And so then pandemic hits, etc. But in that process, I met my co-founder. So she had started a previous company called Mother Nation, and they were doing peer support for new moms. And so I became kind of a consultant and advisor for her. It was direct to consumer, and we got really close. We worked really closely together, and I saw kind of her journey. And then she is, as she says, a recovering attorney, also had kind of this corporate career, left when she had a child, shifted into this kind of peer support for new moms. And in 2021, she started getting calls from friends at law firms saying, this was peak Great Resignation.
Wow.
Women are leaving. We don't know what to do. Can you build out something for us? And so we shifted the model and created a model that was for all moms, and had a coach, and had more structure, and it went really, really well. And so at the end of 2021, the law firm said to us, we'd like to keep going, but we want to make it available to dads because we want more of kind of a bigger employee population. And then Adrian very wisely said, then we include caregivers. And that looks like people caring for a parent, a spouse, a sibling, and altogether, moms, dads, and caregivers are 73% of the workforce. And so that moment at the end of 2021, where we looked at each other, we were like, okay, this is it. This is the version that really clicks in. We go in through the employer. The incentives are all there. Because for me, it was always important that there was efficacy for the individual caregiver, but that there was kind of a business there. I wanted it to be a sustainable, real business. And so once the business model clicked in, then we were kind of off to the races. And so January 1st, really, 2022, we started working together on this new company. And that's what we've been doing 100 miles an hour since then.
Yeah. And you've raised money. So you're one of the only 150 Latinas to raise over $1 million. That's big.
Isn't that terrible? It's
yes.
I mean, I think when I started getting told that, so Adrian, my co-founder, and I, we raised a pre-seed round, and really it was because we saw that we had clicked into something that really worked. We saw the model working over and over again, and we felt like there's a moment right now where this employee-employer dynamic is getting renegotiated, and we can really be a part of that. This market is also so much bigger than anyone thinks. People think this is niche. They think it's moms of babies, and this is everyone. So we felt that moment. So we raised money, we raised a pre-seed, and then we raised a seed, and I started getting told by investors, do you know how few Latinas have done this? And when I started to see the numbers, I certainly felt pride. I mean, for sure, I feel pride about it. But I would say much more than pride, I feel rage. I feel it's offensive. It's offensive. The numbers are so extreme that they tell such a powerful story about systemic inequity. 98% of venture capital dollars go to businesses started by men. 2% of venture capital goes to women. In other words, 2% of the dollars that are going into growing businesses, into big businesses, it's crazy. The numbers are just so extreme. So yeah, I feel so strongly about kind of being part of that solution in some way.
Do you think, I don't know, do you think it's because, I mean, there's this systemic disparity, there's the lack of opportunities, and perhaps also knowledge?
Oh, yeah.
Like, just hearing the stats, I don't even have words because there's so much there. Because women are starting more businesses than ever, but they're not being funded. And so is it because, what do you think? Is it because they don't want to, I'm a woman, don't want to like go and reach, like ask people for money, or we don't know that we can, or all of the above?
All of it. I think, again, like this is a place where like one simple answer would be so satisfying. Unfortunately, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And it is so many facets and so many layers. So I think we have to look at the individual, and then we have to look at the system.
Yeah.
So if we look at the system was designed in a certain way it was designed by men. And so certainly the system was not designed for somebody who was a primary caregiver at home. It wasn't designed, like all of these layers, right? Men tend to go into quantitative or STEM or finance based fields. And that often positions them to understand the economics of fundraising differently. I think it's like all of this systemic stuff, right? Access to capital, talking about money. I don't know what your family was like, but in my family, Latin family, my brother was definitely talked to about money more than me and my sister. It starts really, really early, and those are like powerful cultural forces. I think men are often taught to make explicit asks. Yes. And that gets portrayed as confidence. I think as women, we are often taught not to make people uncomfortable, and that often looks like an implicit ask. Like, would you mind? Would you, like, we dance around it so as not to make people uncomfortable. The result of that is we leave a lot on the table. So when we look at like individual versus systemic, it's really easy to say like, hey, women, ask for more, know your worth. Like, we're not taught how to do that. We're swimming against a current of like social constructs that are telling us not to do that. So the idea of like, just do it, it's very unfair because it assumes that it's fully in our control, and it's not. And so I do think there are skills we can learn that we aren't taught about how to make an explicit ask, about the financial structures behind fundraising, about, the power of you can't be what you can't see, like having more models of what different types of venture-backed businesses look like, what it looks like for women to raise money might be different. That like how you do that in a way that feels authentic to you and doesn't feel like you're like playing a man in those conversations.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's so many layers to it, but it is individual change, and then it is systemic change. And at the systemic level, we need more female investors. We need more Latina investors. That is certainly part of the solution. And then at the individual level, I always have felt like we just have to go further and further upstream. So like, I want to talk to girls in high school about business. I want to talk to girls in college about business. Because if you start planting those seeds, I think we can do a lot on the kind of individual change level. But I think it's important to always come back to this like really this truth, which I believe so strongly, which is you as an individual cannot solve for all of the systemic. We have to have both.
Agreed, 100%. And I'm curious about your thoughts on, so I have a friend who's fundraising, Latina. However, her company is Latina driven. So it's like Latina founded, Latina driven for Latinas. And the pushback that she's received from investors is Latinas don't buy, which I'm like, we have like 3-point-something trillion in buying power. And so I do agree that we need, like, it's not just one solution. It's like there needs to be seats where we are everywhere to break those stigmas. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I also think that fundraising is hard no matter what. It's something few people do. It's something that it takes a huge amount of time. It takes a huge amount of resources and training and all of this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And to have to do that and educate investors on how big your market is twice the job. And so, like, I feel like at Keep Company, we've done a lot of educating of the caregiver population. So we talk a lot about, this isn't just moms of new babies. This is not niche. This is 73% of the workforce, just people aren't talking about it. So we do a lot of educating about how big this group is, how complex, how nuanced, how relevant, how much it's growing with, an aging generation, what they're calling the silver wave. Similarly, I think your friend has to do the work of educating on how big this market is, because what you find is we all have bias, we all have assumptions, and some of that comes from a place of judgment, and some of that just comes from a place of like not knowing. And so there's an element of educating people around the market and saying, no, don't assess this from a place of assumption, which is very intangible and fluid. Judge it from a place of fact. And that's where you have to go to the numbers. You have to go to the data, and you have to find the best data, and you have to validate it. And you have to tell a story about the data and also have the numbers to back it up. But it is a tough job for us and for her, I'm sure, to not just talk about the health of your business and the possibilities that it carries, but also educate on the size of your market, which, lots of founders have to do. It just, when it's like almost like intrinsic to your customer, it's a different job.
Yeah, I know. I think it's like such a catch-22, because I hear those stories of like my friend who's like exhausted and so like frustrated and tired and all of the things. And I feel like in a way people see that and it's like, ni para qué me meto? O sea, like, why would I go that route if I'm going to get the client? But it's at the same time, it's this other thing of like, well, if we don't go in there and like set the stage, share the numbers, then change is not going to happen. So it's like,
totally,
it's a whole thing.
And it's interesting. Like, this is kind of where like my head goes back to like your question earlier about kind of having present that I was different or Latina or like from a different background at work.
Yeah.
You just have to know yourself. Like, I know to me, I'm not doing this to prove a point. I'm doing this because it works. And I know it is like, there's a big business here. I know that in my bones. I'm not. And so in that sense, you have to use the nose as fuel, as like, I will show you. You don't think this is going to be big? Watch me.
Yes. I love that. So let's talk about Keep Company and how, when you said you found the model and the 73% of people that are caregivers in the workforce, what is the role that Keep Company plays? And because essentially the way that I understood it, you have two clients. One is the employer and the other one's the end user. Yep. And so tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so Keep Company is an employee benefit. And for all the reasons we've discussed, we want to impact the individual and the system. For us, the system is the employer. And so we partner with employers that want to retain top talent, and top talent that they lose to regrettable attrition often is because of the demands of caregiving. And so we go into organizations that want to keep parents and caregivers, and we offer a group coaching platform. And so what that looks like is what we found as we tried to get really into like the nitty gritty of what drives sustainability for people that take care of other people. We found two things. One was everyone feels like they're the only one. Mm-hmm. So people feel really lonely and disconnected. And that is a huge barrier to them getting more support and more resources. And then the other thing we found was the skills gap. And it's largely an emotional skills gap. How do you ask for help? How do you say no? How do you communicate a boundary effectively, both at work and at home? Essentially, how do you apply some of this like strategic thinking to how you get what you need as a caregiver? Because ultimately that's what drives sustainability. And so our model is we go into organization, members, employers will say, if you are a parent or a caregiver, whether that's a parent of a baby or a teenager, a caregiver to an aging parent or a sibling, whatever it may be, you can sign up for Keep Company. We gather cohorts. And so we put you into a group of 8 people in your industry, in your function, with a similar dynamic at home.
Wow.
The power of that, we've created a technology that we patented around how we create those groups. And it's really, you often go into a group based on one facet of who you are. So like, you're all Latinas, you know what to do, right? No, like we need more, right? We are multifaceted. And so we connect people based on many facets of identity, and it's hugely powerful. So you get into this room and you're like, whoa, I'm not the only one. And then we pair you with an expert coach who is trained in our model, and you go through a program that is designed to give you the skills to get what you need and think more strategically about your demands at work and your demands at home, and really make kind of a strategic plan for how you want to navigate that. And so what we find is the number one outcome that the employees see is they feel less alone. So 95% of Keep Company members report feeling more belonging, a greater sense of connection. And then they communicate more effectively. And ultimately, we've been able to show that that drives retention for the employer because they feel less isolated, more resourced. So it's really social, emotional skill building and resourcing. So that's what we do.
And I think it's so necessary, especially now, as you said, there's the aging generation or parents who are getting to that place of retiring. And for example, my grandma, we're dealing with like she's getting older, and my tia, for example, who watches her, she can't really have like a full-time job because she has an autistic child and she's caregiving for her mom. And so it's a lot of like, she's pulled in so many different directions that like having a job is just not one that she can absolutely take care of because she's taking care of other things. And so I think when you talk about all the resources, they're so important and necessary at this point. Because I also have clients, for example, who have left their corporate jobs because they've gone into caregiving and the job have like either written them up or had like the conversations of like your performance or you're not showing up to meetings or whatever without really understanding the intricacies. So I think it's a really important resource for both, which is great.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, at the end of the day, for me, again, as like an efficiency, operations, systems, organized soul, I just felt like it makes no economic sense for organizations to invest in people, recruiting, onboarding, training, only to lose them when they do something nearly 73% of them will do, which is take care of somebody else. That makes absolutely no sense. And then you add to that these people don't want to be lost.
Right.
You know, a great majority would like to keep their job. Maybe they have to redesign it, but they would like to continue to add value. And so again, that's where like the work I think is really to give people the space and the tools to think strategically and see all their options clearly. Because I think we can often go into black and white thinking. Mm-hmm. So either I keep doing exactly what I'm doing or I leave my job.
Right.
Often there is a lot in between. And so the goal is really to give people the skills and the resources to make the most strategic decisions about their lives and their careers as possible.
Nice. So tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you and find Keep Company.
Yes, keep-company.com, Keep Company on LinkedIn. That's where we're talking a lot about kind of the issues in the workforce that we're seeing and the solutions that we offer. And I'm on LinkedIn too, but Keep Company will be more interesting.
And people can, like, from the consumer standpoint, they can bring their employers in. They can nominate their employer,
yes.
Right?
So if you go to keep-company.com, you'll see on our site, we have a space to refer your employer and bring Keep Company to your organization. And what I would say to those folks is certainly do it for you, but do it also knowing that there are a lot more other people like you at your organization than you think.
For sure. And for employers, who's your ideal employer?
We often work with employers in professional services. So in organizations like law firms, financial services, consulting, where losing one employee is really, really, really expensive. So the return on investing in that top talent is just obvious from day one. And so we hope to get into lots of different types of organizations, certainly feel strongly that everybody deserves this kind of support. But we've started with a lot of bigger organizations and professional services.
For sure. Awesome. Well, Claudia, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam. We have only a few questions left. What's your remedio that you want to share with us?
Coca-Cola bien fría con hielo, tomada con cucharita.
Ooh, that's for what?
Literally everything. My mom is a doctor, and we joke she like will not give us Tylenol. She like won't give you medicine. She'll be like, tómate una Coca-Cola, mucho hielo, te lo tomas poquito a poquito con cucharita. Like either she prescribes a cold Coca-Cola or a warm chamomile, like manzanilla, un té de manzanilla. Those are the only remedios, I think, in my house.
That's awesome. And do you have a quote or mantra that you live by?
There's a Melinda French Gates quote that I love that says that optimism is not a belief that things will get better. It's a belief that we can make things better. And I think like I believe that so deeply. Like it's not my kind of optimism doesn't come from like this will just happen, but I believe that people can create change. I really do.
For sure. I agree. And do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share with us? Since you're the optimizer, I'm excited for this.
Oh my gosh, the optimizer. I'll share one for the parents out there, which is put your kids' socks by the door, not in their closet.
Oh.
My co-founder told me this. Her kids are a year older than both my kids. And it like blew my mind. I was like, literally, what have I been doing? Because you find yourself as you're scrambling out the door, you run back into their bedroom to get their socks. It makes no sense. Put the socks by the door.
So you have a sock drawer by the door.
Yes, we have like a little basket.
So smart.
That's my tip. So shout out to Adrienne Prentice, my co-founder, for that hot mom tip.
That's a good one, actually, because I've seen it where it's like the kids never have socks on or they have one.
No, it's chaos.
Yes.
And that's like the moment you're about to get out the door and you're like, oh, I have to run over to
uno. That's funny. Okay. And the last question that I've been asking is, how are you taking a restorative pause today?
I gave myself... I canceled a meeting after our conversation to give myself a 30-minute walk break.
Nice. Well done.
That's my pause.
I like that. Well, thank you so much, Claudia, for coming to Café con Pam, for creating Keep Company. I think it's a great resource. Everyone check it out. Dominate your employers. You never know. You need it because 73%, that's big. 73% of people are caregivers. That's wild.
It's big. Thank you, Pam. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
All right, listeners, that was my conversation with Claudia. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are leaving inspired. I was so inspired afterwards. And this is one of those stories that truly, in my case at least, it left me with this sense of si podemos, you know, because hearing a story of someone who made a decision and went and asked for it, it's encouraging. Y al mismo tiempo, at the same time, pues it wasn't easy, of course, you know, it's not a walk in the park. And because we have a model, it adds a little bit, another layer of encouragement. So big shout out to Claudia for being super awesome and such a champion for Latinas. Y bueno, listeners, if this is your first time here, thank you for being here. I invite you to stay so you can subscribe if you are on YouTube, if you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, which are the two most popular ones. Hit follow, drop some stars, drop a review if you feel called. It makes such a difference when you do because it allows other people to discover us. If you think this story would resonate with someone you know, please share it widely with everyone. Just click the share link and send it to all your amigas, amigos, tías, tíos, primas, everyone, so they can get on this listening boat of Café con Pam. Y bueno, let's stay connected at Café con Pam Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, at Café con Pam Pod. On TikTok, check out cafeconpam.com, cafeconpam.com to learn about all of the other stories besides Claudia's. We also have, we have 368 episodes, but we also have lots of pour over stories. We have YouTube exclusive interviews that don't make it to the podcast just because we have so many stories to share. And so definitely go to the website and peruse around. Find some stories. Let me know what you think. I love it when you screenshot and tag me. I really love it when you DM me and you tell me your thoughts on the episode. It's really fun to engage in conversation and actually see that there's people on the other side. Because talking to this microphone by myself could be quite lonely all the time. So it makes me so happy to hear your thoughts or to read them on stories or even your comments on YouTube, even though majority of people on YouTube are so hateful. But once we cross that bridge, I'm hoping you'll find us there. Y bueno, sin más, thank you so much for being here today. Y como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.